Well, good evening. Thank you for joining in to the Lessons of Vietnam show. Tonight, we're going to be asking the question about if we learn anything from the Vietnam War. I posted on Facebook on several different programs. The question, I've got some really strange answers, some great answers, some well thought out answers, but I think you'll enjoy all of them. But let's start off with what you got to do to take part in the show. I'm not, if you would. There we go. I'm your host, Bill Dixon, Vietnam veteran 67, 68. I was with an engineer group out of Long Binh. We are broadcasting courtesy of Nissan Communications from their worldwide headquarters there in Raleigh, right next to in Cary. If you want to contact me with some important information or whatever about the show, my email address is dixonbill80 at yahoo.com. Now, tonight's show, I'm going to invite you to come in and make comments about the comments that we're going to be talking about, or make your own comments about what you think you learned or what the country learned. And that would be by calling in to 919-518-9773, or even better, going on to Skype and go to Computers 2K Voice. Now, as we go through the show, any time, if you see something that you don't think is true, or you have disagreement with, please reach out to me with my DixonBill80 at yahoo.com and tell me what you think, and let's sit and find out which one of us is right, and so we can make sure that the right information is coming out. There's so many misfacts and misinformation about the Vietnam War out there, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight as we go through the reasons and things to learn. You know, right now with the coronavirus out there, there's a lot of veterans going through a crisis. I talked to a veteran this week who had not been out in quite some time. He was kind of homebound. He was in a crisis situation. If you are a veteran or you know a veteran, please reach out to the Veterans Crisis Line, the 1-800-273-8255, and press 1. There is a trained person there wanting to help you. Don't let pride get in your way. Reach out and talk to somebody. They don't want to know who you are, so you don't have to worry about anybody knowing about it. It's just between you and the person you're talking to. So please reach out and get some help if you're out there. Okay. Now, as you can see, I got my words mixed up. Sometimes when I'm typing, my fingers and my brain don't always work. What, if anything, forget the H, that was just a test, the lessons of Vietnam War. And then I had a guy ask me what the word we went. So we can be individually or as a country. What did you as an individual learn, or what we as an individual or a country learn? That is your question. Now let's look at some of the answers and so forth that we've got as we go through. This is one that I thought was fantastic. On our last show, the Medal of Honor recipient Roy P. Benavidez, United States Air Force Special Forces, said this: freedom has a price. That price is often human flesh and blood. He goes on to say, when a free nation such as the United States of America commits its military to war on foreign soil, the objective of that war must be clearly defined, and the majority of the best of the host nation must be committed to the doctrine of individual and national freedom. The Vietnam conflict was a tragedy that never should have happened because, in my opinion, the majority of the South Vietnamese did not understand or support individual freedom. They were ill-prepared as fighters to wage war, and in many it seemed hope for a benevolent dictator or someone to tell them what to do. Okay, as in Korea, the war and military tool was fight with one arm tied behind our back. And another veteran's lesson I served with in the Army Combat Infantry, I saw more than a 20-year-old need to see. Then I have read about the Vietnam conflict extensively. North Vietnam General Giap has stated that after the Tet Offensive of 1968, the North Vietnamese were ready to sign a peace treaty that would keep the DMZ where it was and end the war with the NVA staying above and not supporting or supplying the Viet Cong. But the media and protesters encouraged them to fight on. That is another one of the tests we learned uh, is in the media. There's we got a lot of veterans who put their information in about keeping the media out. Don't trust the media. Media and politicians seems to be the most of the answers and so forth. So let's just see what the next one was. Young men and women died because of a bunch of uncaring and corrupt politicians. They wouldn't let the best army in the world do the job they sent us over there to do. That is a recurring theme quite a bit. Yes, I hate to see the word say that uncaring, but there's a lot of guys who say it was had a lot to do with the government Congress had to make a decision between the Johnson's special anti-poverty program or the war, and it seems like they went more for the anti-poverty program. If a country sends troops in, I can't even read tonight. Do not do it halfway. It was a politician's war, and this country was not committed, and plus the country was divided against itself. As you know, back then we had the civil rights movement, we had women's movement, voters' rights, all kinds of different groups, war protesters, all this sort of stuff going on. So we were a country that was somewhat divided upon itself, and our politicians did send us a war, and they didn't seem to be as committed as they needed to be. And I like this one. Make sure my radio, operate RTO radio has extra batteries. Read map carefully. Carefully enunciate grid coordinates and azimuth into handset. Adjust fire for effect, kill bad guys. Very important lessons or Marines would die. Simplify. That was an important one. That was an individual one. If you guy on the other end didn't understand you and he put down the wrong information, there was no such thing as friendly fire. Friendly fire will kill you just as much as one from an enemy. Don't trust politicians, especially socialists. And I'm going to let you come up with your own explanation for that one. I don't think we learned anything. We've been in Afghanistan for almost 20 years. We didn't learn from Vietnam that a money-making machine for politicians and big business, and that's exactly what's going on now. Now, I put these down just like they were, that I got them from the screen, so forth. So sometimes they're kind of hard to catch, but sometimes whoever wrote some of these doing the same thing I did, their thinking and their fingers and their don't always work in the same way. We were once strangers and now brothers forever. That's an individual, but I think it speaks well for the Vietnam veterans. We all went over there as a stranger, replacing somebody else, but we've got a brotherhood now that's probably unmatched by any other group of soldiers. Don't let politicians run the war. Let the military prosecute the victory in short order, and we will have a victory as we did with, we will have a victory. Okay. Ever stop and think of maybe part of the reason Kennedy was assassinated was that Kennedy wanted to let the military take over operations in Vietnam? Just saying. Kind of wonder because the leader of South Vietnam was assassinated right after Kennedy was. Just do your job to the best of your ability and hope you are one of the lucky ones to go home. That's okay at the time, but we got some young men and women going today, and it was too bad we couldn't use some of the things that we learned in Vietnam War to help them today. It was nice that all of us who were lucky enough to come home. I like this one. Accepted losses are not acceptable. Anytime they plan on a battle, They always have, well, we're going to have so many losses, they're going to be acceptable. If you're one of those losses or someone in your family is one of those losses, it ain't acceptable. The military industrial complex loves to make bombs and body bags, but doesn't participate in any action. Mission tires need the rubber from Vietnam. The politicians need kickbacks and the warriors paid the price. I still will not run Michelin tires on my car because even today, Michelin tire plantations are all over Vietnam. Never enter conflict unless we are going to win. Nothing else is acceptable. You know, as you study the history of the Vietnam War and America's involvement, you wonder if there was ever a plan to win. If it was, nobody seemed to know what it was or go in that way. Never to enter a war run by politicians. Not only was the war run by politicians, it was run by McNamara and his whiz kids, people who did everything. Everything had to be done out on computer. Unfortunately, computers don't do emotions very well. Can't win a war run by politicians. Don't enter a war that you don't plan winning. Don't fight a land war in Asia. And there's been a lot of countries that found that as a problem going all the way back to Genghis Khan. We should learn to keep our noses out of other countries' civil war. Okay. For me, if you go to war, win the damn thing instead of turning your back to it and your allies. Do not use Agent Orange. That's a big one. A lot of you civilians out there do not realize that Agent Orange, Agent Blue, Agent White, Black, Pink were all defoliants. Agent Blue had arsenic in it, and not only is it causing problems with Vietnam vets, it's also causing problems with our children and our grandchildren. It goes on for 3 or 4 different generations. So, and not to mention the children have been born today still in Vietnam with different deformities and so forth. Never expect any welcome for a job. We did the best we could. Oh, yes. It started by fellow brothers. Never let a bunch of politically bigwigs run a war. They don't know a damn thing about fighting a conflict, not a war. So it was not officially a war because Johnson knew he couldn't get war powers passed and his war on poverty done at the same time, so he called it a conflict. The government doesn't give a shit about veterans. I'm going to let that one stand on its own also. Okay. We served and then we were forgotten. Let the experts run the war or conflict. The experts would be the generals, I would think this person is trying to say. That the government is going to screw the soldier. Well, I'm going to let that one stand. I could give you another 30 minutes just on that one alone, but if you go to war, go to win. Seems kind of politics and win seems to be a recurring theme there, all from my fellow Vietnam veterans. Let the generals run the fighting war. Stop fighting when they surrender. In other words, when the generals surrender, then you stop fighting, or when they surrender, we stop fighting. It's stupid to get involved in someone's civil war. And I question somewhat, was it a civil war? Or was it, as we were led to believe, a war between communism and democracy? But then you look back at what Roy had to say, and there was a lot of truthfulness to that. There's the peasants in Vietnam, basically, they didn't really care who the government was to a certain extent. They wanted to be able to raise their rice and their water buffaloes and live their life with their families and so forth. And they were mistreated by the South Vietnamese as well as the communists. So they were kind of caught in the middle there. So you kind of look at it going, could go either way that way. Okay. Nothing learned. You can't win somebody else's civil war for them, but still we're in Iraq and Afghanistan for 2 decades, repeating the same mistakes of Nam. A lot of that is true, especially with the rules of engagement, which we'll talk about some more a little bit later. McNamara should have stayed it forward. I'm going to go amen on that one. He should have stayed running forward rather than getting involved in politics and wars. He had no business running a war with his computer and so forth. Everything was got down to a spreadsheet. Politicians need to stay the hell out of the way once they authorize the war. That's another good one. If you do any studying at all, you remember that Johnson said that they couldn't bomb an outhouse without his approval, and he should have stayed out of the war. He should have said, "Okay, we'll send you more, we'll send you money, and we'll send you men, but other than that, you run the war." Obviously, we as a nation can't learn from our mistakes. We must love war because we are still at it continuously. We do the full court media press on how we need to kick shit out of somebody, and all the young, dumb line up to go fight in it's a freaking shame. I have had to do a little bit of changes of words here. Nothing at all. I kind of agree with that one. No shit. The good old US of A still hasn't learned, still sending our young overseas to die. I like this one. How to hold a doobie. That was one of the more personal ones. Never trust the government. Never trust the media. Along about the time of the Vietnam War, the media went from reporting news and news reporters to talking heads. Then all of a sudden, the media, the news became a business. You had to have good ratings. So you had to get out there and do the sensationalism, and you had to have the guy that could make out the most sensationalism. It kind of personifies, if it bleeds, it leads. I'm waiting on the why we were there. Question get answered before I die. A lot of Vietnam veterans are sitting out there going, yeah, somebody's going to tell me why we were there. And the next person says, I know why we were in Vietnam. It made sense at the time, but now why were we really there? It was economics. I was shot twice in Vietnam and hit from shrapnel from an RPG. Even though what I know now, I would do it again. In 1975, when the war came to its end, it pissed me off that the South Vietnam gave up. A loss of over 50,000 Americans to date that fell still affect us all. Not to say remains of POW MIAs are still coming home after 50 plus years, lessons learned. Let's go back and talk about the South Vietnam gave up. Our Congress cut off all funds and support to South Vietnam. They didn't have a whole lot of choice but to give up because they didn't have gas for the trucks. They didn't have parts for the trucks. They didn't have the food, medication, because Congress, not the American soldier, but our Congress, through South Vietnam and the veterans that served, especially the veterans and their families who lost lives in Vietnam. As far as I'm concerned, we were all screwed over by Congress. South Vietnam, the American soldier who fought in Vietnam, and the American soldier whose names were etched on that wall. They were all screwed over and thrown on the bus by the United States Congress. What if today we had decided not to support South Korea? We cut off all funding to South Korea and some of these other countries, as we did in Vietnam. I know while we're at this time, okay, in 1975 came to an end. I was pissed off. We did that one. Lessons learned. 54 years later, the war haunts you and your dreams. Amen to that. If you ever heard the old saying, when were you in Vietnam? Last night. because there's not too many veterans out there who are not affected in some way every day. If it's nothing about when you go to a restaurant or go into a store, the first thing you look is who's in there. What are the doorways that you can get out? I hope you learn not to trust your government. Never trust the United States as an ally. And that money has nothing to do with happiness. War is messy. Now, if you don't believe, don't trust our ally, ask the Cubans who were involved in the Bay of Pigs when the CIA backed out on them at the last minute, as we have done with other allies. We were there much too long. Originally, Johnson claimed the war was going to last 2 or 3 years. But there was a lot of money being made from people, from different businesses and so forth. A lot of businesses were saved because of the Vietnam War continuing on. Never rely on our government. That's like when the guy standing alongside the road and a car pulls up and says, "Hey, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. You better turn and run." That most trusted news reporter, Walter Cronkite, regurgitated fake news when reporting about the results of 1968 Tet Offensive. As far as I'm concerned, that's when the fake news started. I was in Vietnam during Tet. I was in Saigon shortly. I was in Saigon the day it started, then I was in Saigon a couple of days later. The report came out from all the news media that the Viet Cong had taken over the American embassy, which was an outright lie. Walter Cronkite regurgitated that kind of information over and over again. The Viet Cong did blow a hole in the outer wall and got inside the courtyard of the embassy. That's like going into Central Park and breaking in through the gate of Central Park and saying that you've taken over New York. It didn't happen that way. Then, even though the Tet Offensive was an enormous defeat for the Viet Cong and North Vietnam, the Viet Cong were basically eliminated as a fighting group. Walter Cronkite got on national TV and said the war was a stalemate. North Vietnam was ready to go, "Please meet us in Paris at the peace talks," until Walter Cronkite made his announcement that best we could do was a stalemate. Walter Cronkite may have cost us the Vietnam War right there. Next, please. We fought to stay alive and for the guy next to us. My job when I got to Vietnam is my wife told me she'd kill me if I got killed in Vietnam. So I fought to stay alive because we only had a year. We knew we had a year to serve. So we knew we were coming home. So my first priority was to stay alive myself. And then you always looked out for the guy next to you because you knew he was looking out for you. And that way both of you could come home. Yes, we did. When we got there, after the politicians tied our hands, I was on a ship 3 weeks. Getting there, we landed in LST 1965 from Fort Riley. We were told this is why we were going there, to stop the spread of communism. And I think in some ways we did. But then you go back to what Roy Retribution said a while ago. The people did not have a knowledge of what freedom was. Had we had time to teach them what freedom was, it'd probably been a different perspective from their part. But unfortunately, we didn't really learn the culture of our allies the way that politicians should have. Freedom had nothing to do with the Vietnam War, just American arrogance that we knew better how to run the country. I think that was some of the problems that the politicians had. I was just reading a thing today about the assassination of Prime Minister Diem, how we allowed him to be assassinated because he didn't listen to what he was being told by the American politicians and how they wanted to run the war. You can say that about Iraq and others, but we still went and fought for this country. Now, if you're out there, I'm going to again give you the number. It's 919-518-9773 or Skype. Computer is 2K Voice. Now, I know some of you out there would like to make your own comments or make some comments about these comments. So just come on in and let us know. Don't make me do all the work. I need to find out what you think about it if you didn't send me one. Some people are just too ignorant to think about how many persons gave their lives and were exposed to Agent Orange to die later, not to mention a variety of other medical and mental issues that are being paid for. The American soldier came home exposed to Agent Orange. He came home with people calling him dirty names, baby killers, drug addicts, and so forth, as was put out by the war protesters and so forth, and nobody ever questioned the validity of that. The American Legions of VFWs didn't want us because we were the first people to supposedly lose a war. Well, we basically just packed up and came home, kind of like we did in Korea. Very true. Have son and daughters got medical problems, no help from VA. Daughter just had back surgery a year ago, still dealing with it. Her son also. Speaking about Agent Orange, it goes through 4 generations, but no help from the government. The government realizes that there is a problem with the Vietnam veterans' children and grandchildren, but they can't do anything about it because they say they don't have the money. So we're just tough, you know what, okay? Who believes the Vietnamese enjoyed freedom before we arrived? Going back to what Roy had to say. Or while we were there, or after we left. To them, freedom was to raise their water buffalo and to have their rice crops and take care of their families. That was freedom to them, was been free from government intervention. Unfortunately, both sides, the communists and the South Vietnam, both intervened. Or while we were there, so they didn't have a whole lot of freedom after we left, and especially after we left, because a good part of them ended up in re-education camps. I heard it said by a Vietnamese person, it took 1,000 years to get rid of the Chinese, 100 years to get rid of the French, 10 years to get rid of the Americans. Okay, come on. See if I can. Okay, I had an extra screen come up there out of for some reason there. I'm not certain where it came from. Strange that they hate capitalism and yet love to sell America their wares. If you go to Vietnam today, there's basically 2 Vietnams. South Vietnam is going capitalist like gangbusters. In fact, if you're wearing a pair of Nikes or about any clothes you see right now, it came out of Vietnam. So the free enterprise system in South Vietnam is doing well, even though that the government still suppresses individual freedom. The war was not for freedom. I'm going to ask the question of whoever did this one. What was the war for? That's a good question. If it wasn't for freedom, what was it for? I think the idea was freedom and stop communism, but I think along the line they realized that there was a lot of money to be made from the war. I agree, but the statement that started this post seemed to assume it was. No, I just said in the beginning was what if any of the lessons learned. I'm not certain that our politicians learn a lesson at all. So that was my answer back to whoever wrote that one. And let's see, a very wise person once said, freedom's just another word for nothing to lose. I think that was in a country western song, if I remember correctly. Okay. From the perspective of the South Vietnamese, it was for freedom. Best they understood freedom. South Vietnam was never, by any stretch of the imagination, a democracy. just a succession of corrupt rulers starting with Dim and ending with Vantu, and it was a lot of wasted effort. Okay, I'm going to let that one stand alone. You can come up with your own answer to that one. We are losing our freedom little by little at home. It does, to me, it seems like that with everything that's going on now. It seems like if you're a crook and you get out there and do things against the law, you can get away with it. But if you're a law-abiding system and you do something, you're going to end up in jail. But that's another conversation. Against a dictatorship, socialism, communism, and so forth. That goes back to why we were supposed to be there more than the lessons learned. We'll never forget. I don't think any of us who were there will ever forget it because if you go to war, it will change you. And that change, you bring it back with you and it affects your family and people around you. And again, it goes back against communism, and here it is in our country. In other words, we went and fought communism, and now here it is in our country growing strong. Okay? I think they took a worse retribution on the South Vietnamese people than if we had never been there. You can't fight other people's war. In other words, what this one was talking about, I believe that they after South Vietnam fell, they took people and put them into re-education camps. They even took former Viet Cong and put them in re-education camps because the people who were fighting for one Vietnam, nationalism, that was not what the people in charge wanted. They were fighting for communism. So they had to put the people who were thinking about nationalism into the same re-education camps or slave labor camps as everybody else so they could get their thinking correct. And this person just very simple, nope, there were no lessons learned from Vietnam. I bet that person learned a lot personally from Vietnam. We fought against communist aggression that really did no good, wasted 58,000 lives, and it still won Vietnam today, ruled by the communists. It is run by the communists. If you don't believe it, subscribe to the 88 Project. That is a newsletter that comes out regularly from South Vietnam, and it lists all the dissidents who have been put in jail for almost nothing. You can say something wrong on Facebook and be put in jail for years and years. So it has definitely been ruled by Congress, by communists, but the communists are also enjoying the fruits of the free enterprise system by the way they run South Vietnam. It's a big tourist attraction and so forth. So they learn, even though it is still ruled by the communists. I know I came back originally and said, hey, communism will be dead in Vietnam in 10 years. No, if you go over there as a tourist or you just don't get involved with the people of Vietnam, you'll discover that it is still definitely communist. You got to watch what you say. Communism and communist in name only. I live in Saigon now and live here or visit. You wouldn't think of it as a communist country. This ain't North Korea. Private businesses flourish and Saigon has become a thriving metropolis. Vietnam has its second fastest growing economy. See more, and I don't have that. Yes, South Vietnam is growing, unbelievable, growing, gangbusters, tourists are coming over, hotels, roads. I mean, it's a beautiful place to visit now, great buys and so forth. You can live like a king. But it is still communist. You do not have the freedom to say what you want or what you're thinking. Again, do you have a comment about a particular lessons learned? Share it with the rest of us. Dial 919-518-9773 or Skype, computers, 2K voice, and let's go with either fact or opinion. That's what this is all about. Now, a lot of us out there, we think we know a whole lot about the Vietnam War because we were there. Unfortunately, most of us were there for 1 year, out of the 10 to 12 years or longer that we were there. We know what we did, depending on where you were, who you were assigned to, and what you did. Everybody's story is different. When I went out as a PFC or Spec 4 or whatever with a lieutenant, he didn't bother to tell me where I was or where I was going. He said, go this way. And with his map and compass, which was a danger in itself. So I didn't always knew where I was and what the big picture was. All I knew was what I did for that day. So it was one more day out of my 365 and a wake up. So I'm going to ask you how many out there know who was the longest held U.S. POW? Who was a man held longer than anybody else as a POW in South Vietnam or North Vietnam? Okay, I'll let you come up with the answer and let me know what you thought. We fought for freedom, but not ours. That was the lesson we learned. Then someone says, please remind me what the lessons were, or as some people were answering while we were there, and this gentleman says, or lady says, please remind me why we were there. And that's a good statement too. We fought for the betterment of commerce for the USA and those that profited from our endeavor. If you look at some of the private companies that were doing business with the government and over in Vietnam, like some of the engineering companies, and we definitely for the commerce of the USA. If you look at Colt Firearms, you look at Braniff Airlines, there was definitely a lot of profit being made. My only thoughts are of the 58,492 brothers and sisters we lost. I just want to give them their due. Rest in peace, brothers and sisters. And I think we all try to give them their due because it is a tragedy that so many of them died. But what lessons do we learn other than what we've already been talking about? We fought to keep ourselves and our brothers alive. That's a very personal answer, and it's very true. We fought to keep ourselves and our brothers alive. The guys that was in the foxhole with us, the guys that were humping down the trail or through the jungle with us. That's who we're fighting for. We weren't fighting to win the hearts and the minds of the Vietnamese. We weren't fighting to stop communism. We were fighting for the guy next to us to be able to come home. Rest in peace, my brothers. This gentleman says, enough, the war is over. In other words, he don't think we need to talk about it anymore. We don't need to talk about the lessons. Well, in some ways, the war is over, but in other ways, the war is far from over. Children whose fathers are named on the wall, their war is not over. Veterans who are fighting Agent Orange poisoning or the other developed poison today, their war is not over. Their children's war and their grandchildren's war is not over. The men and women who come home with post-traumatic stress and other maladies from the Vietnam, their war is not over. So the war is far from over because, like I said, the saying was, when were you in Vietnam? Last night. It's not over for most of us. Every day we visit again. It would be nice if it was over, but it will never be over because we're going right back into another one. So right, time to move on, but never forget those who made the ultimate sacrifice. This gentleman or lady was agreeing with the person above. The war is over, and I wish I could agree with both of them, but the war is not over. And the next person says, I agree. And then the next person says, is it? Veterans are still dying. Veterans are still dying today as a result of the Vietnam War. Children are still dying today as a result of the Vietnam War. Veterans are still committing suicide today as a result of the Vietnam War. Is the war really over? And this guy says, I know, have 26 stents in my heart from Agent Orange and various other cancers. Is the war over for them? We fought for Lyndon Johnson's great society. Did some think was something different? If you remember, that was Johnson's big thing, the great society, going to end poverty. How did that work out? The war scuttled the great society plans. In some ways it did, in some ways it added to it. Next person says, I fought for my brothers, just as their brothers were fighting for them. That's why we were fighting, not lessons learned. When I joined the Marines in '66, my thought was I was doing the right thing, protecting the oppressed. Soon realized that my reason was to get home and protect the men in my unit, no matter what it took. Then I come and wished I never did. I think that was, then I came and wished I never did. So a lot of frustration, a lot of disillusionment between the veterans as they fought their particular war. Again, where you were, what you were doing, unit you were assigned to, what year you were there, whether you saw progress or not. When you go in and fight for a hill and you lose 10 or 12 of your friends, you take the hill and the next day pack up and leave so that the bad guys come right back and take that same damn hill again. So somebody's got to go back and do it all over again. You wonder. I fought for this country. Our leaders let us down. Not much leaders, are there? Not only leaders, but the whole damn country let us down. I can understand the comments from this one, the bitterness, because when we came home, we were called baby killers. We were damned. We had things thrown at us. You couldn't get a job. You couldn't tell anybody in Vietnam. But I'm not certain the whole country let us down, but a lot of the country let us down. Quite a few of us, the only people that we could actually gave us a break at all was family. And sometimes even they didn't. I think we did what we should. I've been proud to have served, but politicians, news media, and the people all let us down. I'm proud of the time I served in Vietnam. I did the best I could when I was there. I went to help stop the spread of communism. 58,479 weren't allowed to. We fought for our lives. Amen. We fought to come for 364 days and a wake up, as we said, and to come home. And freedom is for all Americans. The freedom we fought for was supposed to be for all Americans, even those who call us names. I never knew. That was a comment from someone about the one above. Sad thing about that, some came back as dumb as they were when they went. And I'm not certain the word dumb was the correct word there. I think it was more uninformed as they were when they went. I don't think the person meant dumb because that would put himself in there. I think we were all uninformed. When I got orders for Vietnam, I didn't know anything about the country. I tried to look it up in the atlas, and all I could find was French Indochina. And even the atlas I had was too old to know it was called Vietnam because the atlas said it was called French Indochina. So I'm gonna take liberty there and change that for the guy that says not as dumb but not as informed. The stated purpose of the war was to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. Dismal failures as two of the three countries of former French Indochina, Vietnam and Laos are communist, and third, Cambodia is a dictatorship ruled for 33 years by a former Khmer Rouge. Some of what you say is true. However, Vietnam did hasten the fall of the Soviet Union. Was it worth it? That's for each individual to decide. I think so. I've met many people who lived under the Soviets and all told me of the misery they endured. That one is a hard one to because China furnished most of the money and materials for North Vietnam, but the Soviets were also there and spent a great deal of money on North Vietnam, as they were also financing Cuba at the time. So I would say, yes, we did put a financial strain on them to keep those two countries shored up. So I think history will show that us fighting in Vietnam did have some effects on the Soviet Union and their future. I'll let the more learned people go into that one. However, Vietnam did hasten to follow the Soviet Union. The war ended in 1975, and the USSR didn't fall until 1991, and sometime later. After the U.S. was kicked out, the Soviets became Vietnam's patron. In other words, after we left, the Soviets went in there and tried to win the hearts and minds and so forth. But from the South Vietnamese I have talked to, and the times I have been back, they hate the Soviets then, they hate the Soviets now, because the Soviets went in there with heavy hands and treated the people terrible and did terrible things to them, burn all their books and other things that the Soviet communists were doing. No grand ideals here till long after return. I'm not quite certain what the person had who gave that one. No grand ideals or ideas. I may have been meant no grand ideas. As things have gone on long after we return, we see things a bit different now than where we were there. But some of it has been so much mistruths about the Vietnam War and those of us who have fought it and so forth. It's hard to go into history, recorded history, and get the real stuff because the real stuff and the bad stuff are all right together, and it's hard sometimes to discern which one of which. And it somewhat depends on the attitude of the person who was trying to get the information. An ideal of that would be to look at Ken Burns's fiasco about the Vietnam. You have the ideals that he had, or ideas he had, and where he got them from, distorted the Vietnam War, and those of us were involved about as much as anybody did. Hang in there, brothers. We did what we had to do when called by our country. Together we carry on. Peace. As I mentioned a while ago, and someone else mentioned a while ago, we're still a very strong brotherhood. I like to wear my Vietnam veteran hat whenever possible because it always gives me a chance to meet another Vietnam veteran and talk. Now, if I get a free lunch out of it, that's fine. But the real reason is it gives me an opportunity to meet other Vietnam vets. It also gives me an opportunity to tell people who were claiming to be Vietnam vets who couldn't find it on the map, they're full of bullshit. But I wear it because there's a lot of really good brothers out there, and you'll be surprised at just how many people in your neighborhood would be considered real heroes for what they did. Next one was freedom for who? The Vietnamese? Sure as hell wasn't for freedom for America, and there was no chance in hell that Americans would have lost any freedom if we lost Vietnam. That was, how would the freedom of America got anything to do with the freedom of Vietnam? The only freedom Americans will lose will come within, and we're on the verge. As Khrushchev says, the Soviet Union or no other country will ever take us over. We will fall from within. With all the things that are going on there today, you kind of wondered that somebody knew something we didn't. Another one says, to protect my brothers in the field. That was it. This man was evidently involved with 105s. Then someone says, amen. I guess that was to protect my brothers. When I'm gone, if I remembered, let it be said, this vet never surrendered. U.S., U.S., U.S. We as men and women who participated in Vietnam, we never surrendered. Congress screwed us all over, as well as the South Vietnamese people. We didn't surrender. Congress took the ball and went home. We didn't quit. And the South fell 3 years after we left. And then when someone agrees, says, you got that right. And the next Vietnam veteran says, we were lied to and are still being lied to. Wars for profit and political power, not freedom. World War II was fought to stop Hitler, the last justified war. A lot of truth to that, a lot of thought. Capitalism, greed, certainly no Christian religious ideology. Thou shalt only kill if there's money for me in it, but not my family. We hate war. Someone learned to stay alert. That's a good one. Personal. Don't let the politicians dictate how we fight a war and lock up celebrities who go and visit the enemy. Oh, that one was a good one. We know, of course, Jane Fonda and quite a few other actors and celebrities who went over there, Joan Baez, and so forth, who went over there and gave aid and comfort to the enemy. They definitely should have been locked up and lost their citizenship. So I personally like that one. We should have. The president, his staff can and will throw you under the bus if you let them, or if celebrities tell you how to run a country in the war. Congress was also complicit in getting men and women killed with their ignorance. We've already talked about how Congress, the Cooper Church and the Church Amendment affected us. So, okay, I asked you a question a while ago. How many of you said it was Alvarez? If you did, you were wrong. As the prisoners were being prepared to be released, word came down to Hanoi Hilton that to tell Alvarez, there's a guy here that brought up from South Vietnam, held longer than Alvarez, another prisoner says. His name is Jim Thompson. Alvarez had read about Thompson being held in the South years earlier and wondered whether anyone could survive in such conditions. His reply biography says, I'll be damned. United States Army Special Forces Captain Floyd James Jim Thompson went to Vietnam in December of 1963. He was only supposed to be there for 30 days. For his deployment, he had not heard of Vietnam. He was assigned to serve a 6-month tour of duty, but was captured on March 26, 1964. He was released on March 16, 1970. Jim Thompson spent the next 9 years, 3,278 days as a prisoner of war. First as a prisoner in the Viet Cong in the jungles, and later they moved him to the Hanoi Hilton when they started thinking about it. Jim Thompson. The reason almost nobody knew who Jim Thompson was, and the fact that he was a POW, is his wife asked the Pentagon not to let the word out that he was a POW. I'm not going into the reasons why, but she had her own reasons, which I'm not going into now. I would highly recommend you get his book, Glory Denied, and read it. It's a great book. I've read it. But Alvarez was the second longest held POW, but Jim Thompson was the secret longest held POW. You see what I mean when I say that sometimes, depending on when you were in Vietnam, who you were assigned to, your job, and what part of the country and the area you were there, all of us' story is different. It's easy to listen to the rumors out there, especially in the military. The military loves rumors. But for years, everybody thought it was Alvarez. Okay? I learned to never trust my government, no matter which side is in control. They're all selfish bastards. And I think he means by which side, is in control. I think he talked about the two main parties. Not to put words in his mouth, but stop politicians from trying to be military geniuses and running the war. Put generals who know what they're doing in charge. Tell politicians to stay home and take bows in front of the TV for all the success they would be having. You notice kind of a theme here. When we go to war, go to win. In other words, when you go to war, have a winning strategy and a get out strategy. Get the damn politicians out. Politicians suck. Okay? Mind your own business. Don't put your nose into someone else's business. That war is insanity. It goes against everything I was ever taught about sanctity of life. Now, that's a good lesson to learn. Unfortunately, it's a hard lesson to teach everybody else. And then someone agreed. It was a good lesson. A nation shouldn't go into a conflict without a definite plan and duration. Any military action exceeding 90 days should have a declaration of war voted on by Congress. We missed that one, didn't we? I like this one. Carry twice as much ammo. The key word of that was carry. Because if you're out there humping it all day long in the heat and about 5 or 6 canteens on, that ammo gets heavy. But then again, if the you know what hits the fan, it sure is nice to have that extra ammo. Don't let the politicians get involved in running the war. Seems to be a recurring statement. Learn lots about myself and others when the shit hits the fan. Only later did I appreciate how those shitbag politicians sold us out. Any war fought on body count is bullshit. We should have nuked Hanoi and not have lost nearly 70,000 during the war. Anytime you fight a war, and you fight a war on nutrition, you're going to lose, especially when you're dealing with someone like North Vietnam, because they didn't care how many of their own people they lost. And you have to fight by body count to decide whether you won or lost today. If you kill 5 more of them than they killed of you, then you won today. That's a dumb way to keep up a chart on how you're winning or not. If you go in there and you take that hill and then you turn around and leave again, and you have to go back 2 weeks later and take that hill again, did you win the same battle twice? Or did you win the first battle 2 times? But how much did it cost in between? Fight to win and don't poison your army. Goes back to Agent Orange and Agent Blue and Black and so forth, and some of the other things. Do not get into a war unless you intend to win, and win now. Okay, got that theme going there. Well said. The Trang 66. We only sent out some of our aircraft with half of a full fuel load. Why would we send a helicopter out or an airplane out with half a fuel load? Because quite often, if the helicopter was out on site and he was doing cover for a patrol down below that was getting the crap kicked out of them, and they had to leave, not because their ammunition ran out, because they had to go back for fuel. Boy, if I'd heard about that and I was on the ground, I'd go back and find somebody and shoot them myself. Go all in big or get on the porch. Goes back to barking dog, get on the porch. I learned that I could count the days in the field by the salt rings on my jacket. Amen to that. Every day, it's kind of like counting the rings on a tree. Every different ring of salt where you would sweat, count another day to the day of Deros. Never again allow politicians make decisions on how to fight a war. Don't fight a war unless you got a plan to win the war. And nobody told me at the time, but I'd be willing to bet you everything in the world there was no, There was no plan to win the Vietnam War. So when you look at it that way, why were we there? We were there to stop communism, but how will we know when we stop communism if we only count the people we killed? It's all about the military-industrial profit machine, the cluster to be done with. Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial profit machine when he was president and also as general. And this person says that the first answer there or statement is correct. If I remember, it was LBJ who micromanaged the Vietnam War from the Oval Office. Well, he micromanaged it along with Mr. Robert McNamara, who should have stayed at Ford, as we learned a while ago. And somebody says it was the generals who ran it. I'm not certain what war they fought, but it wasn't the Vietnam War. The generals had to do what the rules of engagement ran it. 27 pages that LBJ and McNamara came up with called the rules of engagement, that what we could and couldn't do. If a plane was flying, if one of our planes was flying over a MiG on the ground, we couldn't shoot at it until the MiG was in the air. If we were flying over a sound missile site under construction, we could not shoot at it until it was operational. We flew the same route every day at the same time to do the bombing. So if you had an anti-aircraft gun, they would know, well, we got to get off break or finish lunch early because it's time for the Americans to come through on the bombing run. So it wasn't the generals who ran it. Never to send U.S. troops in danger for a bullshit reason again. Oops. I guess we didn't learn that too good. Amen to that one. And I love this one. With enough Tabasco sauce, you can make a turd edible. I think of ham and llamas when I think of that. I think there's a lot of similarities there. This was a good one. Bone spurs do not matter. Our corrupted government offered us a money pit battlefield so that arms dealers and banksters, which is a new word, banksters could make hundreds of millions of dollars restoring Southeast Asia and to give the Vietnamese people to communism. North Vietnam was financed by Exxon refinery. I don't know anything about the Exxon refinery. As the person down below says, I don't know about the Exxon refinery business, but I do believe that the Haiphong Harbor incident never occurred. Where have you been? We've decided a long time ago that Haiphong never occurred. Well, it didn't occur August 4th. It actually occurred August 2nd. But we had our ship inside the Gulf in North Vietnamese water, working with the South Vietnamese who were attacking. So we're not exactly we're innocent in this thing. But as far as the firing on the 4th, firing on the Maddox never happened. Even the admiral who was on the ship said that he didn't believe it happened, and they have no proof that it ever did happen. And McNamara did ask later to the General Jip if anything happened. He said it didn't happen. Stockdale, who's flying above the ships that day, was what in the hell are they firing at? In other words, he wanted to know what the American ships were firing at because he couldn't see anything they were firing at. He said that before he was shot down. Don't take at face value what the government tells you. Boy, it's so profound. No more police action war. Amen. We haven't done too good with those. Keep politicians out of the wars and let the generals make the decisions. Third theme there. It's like these guys got together and discussed it. If you don't have leadership who wants to win, don't go. Amen. We can't fight wars all over the world and expect to control all that goes on in those nations. We have no real business in a war except to protect our borders and possessions. Of course, there are reasons for us to be in combat for limited periods. Do not send troops to war individually. This is a big one, folks. Most of us went over to replace people who were either deroasted and come home or were wounded badly and couldn't go back or were killed. There was no unit cohesion. Plus, most officers, lieutenants and above, only served 6 months in the field and then were called back to headquarters to serve there. So by the time a lieutenant really learned how to take care of his men and to fight the war, they pulled him out. There were so many officers who were who went to Vietnam just to get their ticket punched. So to get how many air medals they could get, how many bronze stars and silver stars they could give themselves. When you send individual troops in and you do not have unit cohesion, you go in there as a new guy, people are going to stay away from you because they're afraid you're going to get them and yourself killed. And just about the time you learn how to fight well, it's time for you to train your replacement for the 2 or 3 days you got to work with them. Korea, the Koreans, when they fought in Vietnam, they did it by units. They sent a unit to Vietnam. When their time was up, that unit came back and another unit was sent. I think that was a big lesson that we learned, and unfortunately, I'm not certain how much we learned it. I think now we are sending people over more as units, which was good. The military should have news blackouts. The public doesn't need to know everything. They didn't in World War II. Vietnam, as we know, was the TV war. We watched it on TV every night at dinner, and little sound effects was all we saw. We saw a little girl running down the street, burned from napalm. But we didn't learn that the American soldiers had nothing to do with that. So we were led to believe that mean old American soldiers were burning up little girls. The picture of the general in Saigon shooting the man in the head on national television. Americans had nothing to do with that, but that's what it showed on TV. Folks, I'm going to stop here tonight because we're running out of time. So I want to invite you to come back for the next show, which is, let's see, I just made a note and just turned right back around and lost it. The next show is 23rd of September at Nissan Communications, as long as Amnon lets me come back. So come back and we'll hear some more of the stories and so forth. There's been some really profound thinking by our Vietnam vets out there. I have also asked some civilians for their answers and so forth, so I've got some of those. But I look forward to going over some more of these at the next show. By the way, this coming weekend, the 13th, is Grandparents' Day. If you're a grandparent out there, I hope somebody remembers you and takes you out to eat or buys you a card or whatever. The 18th is National POW/MIA Day. If you're in the Raleigh Triangle area, don't tell anybody I told you this, but at 6 o'clock on the 18th at the state capitol, there will be a POW/MIA ceremony, okay? Don't tell anybody I told you that because I don't want too many people down there and so forth, because the Black Lives Matter will be down there and they won't let anybody on the Capitol ground. So I hope you got something out of the show. I was hoping some of you would let me know some comments and so forth instead of having to make all the comments. But thank you very much. You can see this again by going back to www.nissancommunications.com and going to on demand and see the show again. So if you got some friends out there you'd like to talk to on the show and so forth, tell them to go ahead and go on to on demand and watch this show or some of the other shows and so forth. One I would recommend is you go back and look at the 2 shows we did on Ken Burns' fiasco and find out why we think that Ken Burns stuff was absolute fiasco with the information he had. Thank you all so much and have a good night. Be safe, and thank you for watching.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.